Welcome. I am Brandy Bynum Dawson, Senior Director of Policy and Advocacy at the North Carolina Rural Center. On behalf of the entire Rural Center staff, I'm thrilled to have you joining us today for this kickoff to National Small Business Week. Small Business Week, marked every year the first week in May, began in 1963 when President Kennedy issued a proclamation recognizing the critical contributions of America's entrepreneurs and small business owners. At the Rural Center, we have been champions for small business in North Carolina for 35 years. The importance of small business success is vital to the sustainability and growth of rural communities, rural people, and rural places. Prior to 2020, our state was witnessing a downturn in new small business ventures, but in a year after the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, we began to see the opposite. While the early days of the pandemic saw many businesses shutter and close their doors, few expected that over the next 2 years, new business formations in North Carolina will be at an all-time high. Since 2020, the North Carolina Department of the Secretary of State has reported that over 300,000 new businesses were registered. In 2021 alone, the 178,300 new business creation filings were more than double the amount registered 4 years prior. This is phenomenal news for our state's people and places. Now, what can we learn from this? And what are we hearing from small business resource providers and entrepreneurs across the state? Well, today's speakers and presenters will speak to that very question. Today, we are very excited to have Secretary Elaine Marshall and Bill Toole from the North Carolina Secretary of State's office with us to highlight the data behind North Carolina's record number of new business formations, including what areas are seeing the largest growth in business creation, demographics of new business owners, survival rates, and much more. We'll then hear from José Alvarez from Prospera, North Carolina, Tammie Hall from the North Carolina Office for Historically Underutilized Businesses, and Ann Shaw from the North Carolina Small Business Center Network on what they're hearing on the ground in main streets across the state and what that means for you and your business. We'll close today's session with a Q&A, allowing you time to ask questions of the speakers, including some already pre-submitted questions. Thank you for sending so many thoughtful items ahead of time. We're so glad to have you all here. Now, before we get started, I'll take just a moment to review a few housekeeping items. Please note that all participants are muted, except for the presenters and speakers, of course. We do, however, want to give you the opportunity to engage with our expert panelists. You can do so via the Zoom Q&A feature. If you're using the call-in option only, you can email your questions to events@ncruralcenter.org. Also, today's webinar will be recorded and available on our website in the coming days. We'd also like for you to continue today's conversation on Twitter. Be sure to follow and tag at NC Rural Center and at Rural Counts and use the hashtag Small Business Week. Now, please allow me to introduce North Carolina Secretary of State, Elaine Marshall, who has been serving our great state for over 50 years. In 1996, she became the first woman ever elected to a statewide executive branch office in North Carolina. In addition to her critical role as Secretary of State, she has also served in the North Carolina Senate and is a former teacher, small business owner, and private practice attorney. Secretary Marshall will be followed by Bill Toole, Deputy at the North Carolina Secretary of State's office. Bill is in charge of many divisions within the department, including the Business Registration Division. Before joining the department in 2020, Bill was a practicing environmental lawyer, among many other roles, including having been a commercial fisherman, carpenter, newspaper journalist, and even a French chef. Secretary Marshall, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. It's an honor to join you this morning virtually for this session as we focus on our explosive new business growth in North Carolina, and we kick off National Small Business Week. As a former small business owner, I understand the ups and downs and that things can happen. So we need to make sure that we support our small businesses. I want to thank Patrick Woody and the North Carolina Rural Center for hosting us today and for the invitation. I am joined by Deputy Secretary Bill Toole, who'll be doing a deeper dive with some of the data that we will present this morning. And that will be the jumping off point for our panel discussion. So let me dig in. We don't have much time. For those of you who know me, this will come as no surprise to you. For those of you who have not yet met me, I try to be a straight shooter, and so I don't try to sugarcoat things. So to be brutally honest, for us here at the Secretary of State's office, it's been a hell of a 2 years. Let's face it, 2020 and 2021 were tough years, no matter where you lived in the world. The global pandemic caused great challenges, both in our professional lives and our personal lives. But it's also been a heck of a 2 years at the Secretary of State's office for entrepreneurs. As the North Carolina Secretary of State, my office is responsible for registering new businesses. To give some context, this graphic shows us new business creations from 1997, when I was first elected Secretary of State. As you can see, back then we were registering more than 30,000 new businesses a year. Fast forward to 2019, and that number had jumped to over $100,000 per year for the first time. Since June of 2020, during the heart of the pandemic, we started experiencing explosive growth in new business. Came as a surprise, really a shock to many of us, and I'm not sure any of us could forecast what we started experiencing and continue to experience today. Earlier this year, we released the final numbers for 2021, and new business creation outpaced every other year of record, and they've doubled since 2017. Final calendar year for new business creation filings for 2021 grew by 40% over 2020, totaling 178,300. That is compared to the prior year record of 127,000. Friends, on September 9th of last year, we blew by that 127,000 number, and we had the balance of the fourth quarter yet to go. So we shattered it, and we haven't slowed down since. Last month, I announced that we set a record for calendar year first quarter this year. January through March of 2022, new business creations totaled 47,000. That exceeded the previous first quarter set last year of 45,000. What's even more staggering is 2 years ago, our new business creation for first quarter was 26,000. Think about that. That's more than 80% growth in 2 years. Hold on to your seatbelts. We are now creating more than 700 new businesses a day. I love this graph. What this graph shows you is the increased revenue, since we're a fee-for-service organization, that goes to the state's general fund because of the growth. And the fact that the Secretary of State's operating funds stay relatively stagnant. You see that red line along the bottom? It means that we're doing twice the work with about the same staff of 177. That red line shows the increase, and juxtaposed to the numbers, the increase in our workload, the increase of our general fund deposits, and yet our appropriation from the General Assembly is that red line down at the bottom. But I hope you're also asking, where did all the growth happen? You can see from this heat map, it was all over the state, with the darkest states being the largest increase. All 100 counties saw at least double-digit growth in new business creation in fiscal year 2021 compared to fiscal year 19 to 20. A great headline for all of us is that some of the most rapid growth came in several Tier 1 counties, which we all know are the more economically distressed. Scotland and Edgecombe counties both grew by more than 200%. All in all, the Secretary of State's office has filed creation paperwork to help open the doors for more than 1.7 million new businesses in North Carolina since I became Secretary of State in January of 19. That's 1.7, that's 1997, excuse me, I'm getting tongue-tied here. More than 1.7 million new businesses across North Carolina since I became Secretary of State in January of 1997. That is really 1.7 million dreams for small business owners, countless jobs created, and incredible growth for North Carolina's economy over the past couple of decades. Now, based upon the staggering trend of new business creation growth, we undertook an initiative to survey new business owners during the month of their 1-year anniversary. There is some important information to be gleaned from this data. Now, we are still in the process of analyzing the data, and we have and are continuing to survey to collect additional information. Our data shows us that we have a relatively short window of time to assist these new businesses with resources. Using the survey data and our historical failure rate, we wanted to increase this possibility of success for these companies. So at the Secretary of State office, we launched a pilot project to help these new businesses get immediate access to crucial resource information that previous business owners told us was important, or it was something that they wished they'd knew before they began. We've been working with local service providers to get information in front of these new business owners. The agency project is known as Rural Rise NC. RISE stands for Resources for Innovators, Startups, and Entrepreneurs. This project links new businesses to significant free and low-cost resources like lenders that focus on small and startup businesses, and a checklist of crucial steps for new businesses to follow to be successful. We started with 14 counties in the pilot project, and we are almost through the first phase. We've been getting a lot of terrific feedback from business owners. So today, I'm announcing that we will begin to expand beyond these 14 counties with the most immediate focus on the rest of the 78 counties considered rural by the Rural Center. Service providers in these areas, you will likely be hearing from my office soon. The Secretary of State's office is the front door to more than 178,000 new businesses in 2021, entering North Carolina's entrepreneurial ecosystem. Our mission and our challenge is to give each of these businesses and the ones created before them every opportunity to being successful. I look forward to joining you at the panel at the end. I'm now going to turn it over to Deputy Secretary Bill Toole to look deeper at some of the numbers from our survey and other data from our agency. Bill?
Thank you, Secretary Marshall. I really appreciate it. So we took a look at our data, and one of the first things we've learned, in addition to this extraordinary increase in new business creations, is we took a look at what businesses were reporting to us about their continued operation. And this graph looks back over the past 11 years, for which we think we've got the best data. And what you can see here is that businesses seem to have about a 2-year window before we start seeing a fall off in operation. In year 3, we see about 25% of these businesses not reporting that they are operating. And by year 7, 50% are no longer reporting that they're operating. So that tells us that there's probably that first 2-year window of a business operating when folks can come in and help them push past that year 3 to year 7 inflection point. We also asked the question to ourselves, who are these new businesses that are coming up in this COVID era? And we were interested in the COVID era cohort. I'll call that the 2020 folks that first were formed. And then after that, we got information on the survey that we sent to them, and we did the similar survey for the 2018 business creator cohort, 2019, and we just recently completed a survey of the January through March 2021 cohort. We focused our survey, because we didn't have any money, on those for whom we had email addresses, and the responses that came back were quite good. We have 95% confidence that we're within plus or minus 5% of what the responses tell us. So first question was, is the business still operating? And 92% said yes. That's consistent with what we thought we would see. We also asked ourselves, is this the first business you created? And 48% more or less across the different cohorts, it might have been a little bit more, said yes, this was our first business. And then we said we had this hypothesis that in the COVID era cohort, that's the 2020 folks, that many of them would have been creating out of desperation. That's not what the data showed us. So this is not displaying the way it should. I'm sorry. The blue is those that chose to form because they saw a business opportunity. 58% said they saw a business opportunity. And in this other side here, the small arrows, the small pie pieces, that was just 11% said that they had either lost the job or their business had failed. So we'll get that fixed for you guys, but it was a very small percentage of folks who said that they were forming a business out of what I would call desperation. We also asked, okay, how well are you doing in that first year of operation? And 29% surprised us and said that they had revenues of greater than $75,000. Another 19% had revenues of between $25,000 and $75,000. Quite surprising to us. What's the age distribution? Interestingly, it's in that group 35 to 64 years of age. And then we asked, okay, are you new to the area or you been in North Carolina for a while? And well over 80% had been North Carolina residents for at least 6 years or more. So who are these new businesses? Have they achieved the goals that they intended in that first year of operation? And 52% said that they had more or less or even better exceeded their expectations of what the goals they'd set for themselves. That was significant, we thought. And then we asked the question, all right, give us some more demographic data. This is interesting because you do see a COVID bump for women-owned business. That's you can see 53% in the 2020 cohort self-declared as women-owned businesses, and it's reverted back to our mean. We saw a similar COVID bump for minority-owned businesses during for the 2020 cohort. We don't collect the type of business as a normal course of operation, so we had to ask in the survey, what do you do? A good many are in the services area, some retail. In the 2021 survey, we asked more specifically things like, were you involved in real estate? And 11% of the 2021 cohort said that they were involved in the real estate area. So we got a little bit more refinement in the most recent survey. What kind of obstacles have these folks encountered that they report? Not surprisingly, 38% say they need more money. Insufficient know-how was interesting to us. Government regulations, 25% said that they were having some difficulty with government regulation. We did not have more granularity about what that meant. Frequently, it seemed to be local kind of confusion more than anything else when we got narrative discussions. I would also point out these social capital kinds of things like lack of peer support, 13%, and then a marketing kind of answer, 23% insufficient customer base. If they were in rural areas, we saw the inadequate broadband across the board of 9%, but if they had been in the rural area, 18% reported broadband was an obstacle. So not surprising, but what was interesting to us was how large that report was. Where'd you get your information? This kind of surprised us as well. 50% said they got their information from the Secretary of State website. We thought there would be broader distribution from other sources. 49% writ large said that they got their information from other sources. And by the way, in this particular question, you could check all that applied, so that's why it exceeds 100%. Of the 78 rural counties that we had, they skewed toward getting their information from the Secretary of State website. If they were also rural, they also tended to depend more on the Community College Small Business Center. And if they were in the urban counties, they tended to get their information from incubators and nonprofits. That was a little stronger there. And then we asked, looking back, what would you have liked to have had? Funding, 42%. What else have we got? How to start, 27%. Kind of the professional type questions, 31% business type, LLC, or 39% accounting and taxes. But I would also call your attention to the mentoring and counseling, 22%. Again, this social capital kind of concept was quite important to a lot of folks. It was not just about money. And then marketing, 31%. So that's all our slides right here. Let me stop sharing and leave it to the panelists.
Oh, I'll hop in there, Bill. I want to thank you both, Bill and Secretary Marshall, for that very informative presentation. And thank you for all the hard work your team's done over the past few years shepherding these new businesses through that creation process. This significant uptick in new business formation is certainly something to be celebrated. We certainly celebrate it at the Rural Center, but we also know there's a lot of work left to do to get to the bottom of what's the meaning behind this data and what effect these entrepreneurs are going to have on our state's economy as we move forward. Good morning, everybody. I am Miles Kirksey, Advocacy Engagement Manager with the North Carolina Rural Center. And today I have the esteemed honor of facilitating a panel with some of the hardest working folks in the state. The four individuals that I'm joined by today have worked tirelessly since the early days of the pandemic, providing critical support to hundreds of thousands of new entrepreneurs, along with many thousands of existing small business owners as they navigated the pandemic. We're excited to have them here today to share with us their perspective on what they're seeing on the ground from these entrepreneurs they serve every day. We also look to identify the gaps and needs, as well as opportunities to ensure these businesses stay afloat for the long haul. That said, without further ado, let me welcome José Alvarez, Vice President of Prospera in North Carolina, Tammie Hall, Director of the North Carolina Office for Historically Underutilized Businesses, also known as the NC Hub Office. We'll also welcome back Secretary of State Elaine Marshall to join us for the panel. And last but not least, we have Ann Shaw, the State Director for the Small Business Center Network. So welcome, guys. Understanding that a minute is not a lot of time, we do want to hear from everybody. I'd like y'all to briefly introduce yourselves, the work your organization does, specifically the work your organization does to support small businesses across the state. So 1 minute or less, I'll start with you, Jose, then we'll go to Tammie, Secretary Marshall, and close with Ann.
Good morning, Miles, and the entire audience. It is a pleasure. Thank you to the Rural Center for the invitation. And as you heard, my name is José Alvarez. I work for Prospera, which is a nonprofit organization that provides in-culture, in-language support and consulting to the growing Latino community here in North Carolina to help them become economically independent through entrepreneurship.
Good morning. I'll just jump right in. Certainly, it is a pleasure to be here. Many thanks to the Rural Center for all that you're doing to continue to keep small businesses at the forefront of North Carolina. I am more than excited to always come to you and share a perspective from the Hub Office, where I have the pleasure of serving under the Department of Administration, where Secretary Pamela Cashwell is our leader. It is always a pleasure to be here and continue to have conversation around how do we level the playing field for our small businesses, our minority businesses, our women businesses, all of these businesses which are so vital to economic sustainability here in North Carolina. So happy to be here with you.
We'll go to you, Secretary Marshall.
Well, you got a flavor for what we do here, but we have a lot of other functions other than business registration. But most of them are business support in some way. Things like notary commissioning, trademark enforcement, which is a place where you can register and get a North Carolina trademark. We also protect consumers from scams in the investment area and some other areas. And people that are looking for investment opportunities of a certain level have to have that registered with us. So again, working with the entrepreneurial community out there. Let me make a comment on the slide that said most people got their information from the Secretary of State's office. Under some circumstances, that would be very pleasing. It was alarming to us because we should not be the first stop. the resources that are out there on a business plan and thinking about financing, et cetera, is where people need to be engaged before they come to us. So that's why that's a strong motivation for what we're doing with this project, because we know the resources are out there, but connecting the new entrepreneurs to them is not happening like it needs to.
Thank you for adding that. Over to you, Ann. Oh, you're on mute.
I think I'm unmuted now. Good morning. Well, thank you. So go ahead, Miles.
No, quickly introduce the Small Business Center Network for those who
Absolutely. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you so much for having us. Happy Small Business Week to everyone on the call today. And sharing just a little bit about our small business centers. They're located at every community college across North Carolina. That's 58 colleges, each with a small business center, reaching into all 100 counties. We work with both existing small business owners as well as aspiring entrepreneurs at whatever stage they find themselves. So whether that's when they're in the ideation phase, just thinking about an idea for a business, and also when they're moving forward with planning, launching, or scaling their business. And we offer 3 primary services: confidential business counseling, practical high impact training, and resource and referral services to help people with their dream business. All of these free services, think of them as services that have been prepaid with your tax dollars. And so whether someone needs help with the development of a business plan, assistance with marketing and social media, loan package preparation, or just about any topic that relates to starting and successfully operating a business, the Small Business Center Network business counselors can dig in and provide expertise. As part of the state's entrepreneurial ecosystem, small business centers are first responders to North Carolina's small businesses, both in good times and in times of crisis. And when our clients entrust us with their dreams, we have a deep responsibility to help them nurture that dream to create a viable enterprise. So that's a little bit about our small business centers.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Ann. I do like the first responder word as well. I think everybody on this panel today has served as a first responder over the past 2 years when it comes to these small businesses. So given what each of you has shared, I'll start with you, Secretary Marshall. What do you make of this rising record trend in new business formation? What do you guys are hearing is motivating these new entrepreneurs to start their new firms?
Well, a lot of the stuff I'm going to talk to you about either comes from national reading and national studies, but also from anecdotal. I think a lot of people, since we saw a lot of women with that bump in there, want a control over their work-life balance. That involved the school problems that were going on, childcare, elder care, those kinds of things. I think a lot of folks that are starting new businesses had economic uncertainty in their mind, and so they wanted to have something to fall back on. And I think we're continuing to see that as inflation goes up. People need a second job, and they decided to go ahead and get that in some way, shape, or form. Whether it was a skill they picked up by being quarantined and studying online and trying to figure out how to do something better, or it was a hobby that they had, they're just moving forward on their own. Some we see have been told that it's a requirement to become an LLC in order to get a certain business engagement, which is probably an incorrect motivation, but it's what people do to be able to get those jobs. And they really are not the same entrepreneurs that we're thinking about in general with new businesses.
And looking at our resource providers on the call, Jose, Tammie, Ann, what are y'all hearing on the ground is motivating some of the new clients y'all are working with?
So I'll jump in real quick again. What I'm seeing really is that businesses are doing exactly what we asked them to do from a state perspective. Early on in the pandemic, we saw that, number one, there was a lack of access to resources, grants, and capital, which was not new to the businesses that our office serves. Minority businesses, women-owned businesses, they often struggle with access to capital, but certainly Governor Cooper did a very smart thing. We created a grant program first ever grant program in state government. And we've been able to disperse over $21 million that was operated under our office. What we thought is if we could provide this funding, this would help to keep doors open, but it would also give these businesses an opportunity to pivot, to change in the middle of a pandemic. And what we've seen, even from the data today, is many of those business owners in our mind, they pivoted. And even in that, we're seeing that they're being very resilient, which we know small businesses, minority businesses are in general. You know, we address the issues that we have and we figure out a strategy to move forward. And we're seeing some really good positive things in the synergy from these business owners.
Anything y'all would like to add, Ann or Jose?
I can add to that. So I'm gonna agree with Tammie. A lot of these entrepreneurs that we serve are really following what we're recommending. When COVID started in early 2020, nobody was starting a business. Now we're seeing a result of that, and I think that's where the trend is going. A lot of these entrepreneurs at the beginning of the crisis were just calling everybody desperate. How do I keep my business afloat? In particularly with the end users that we serve, the Latino business owners. I mean, the access to capital, like Tammie mentioned, and like we all know. And the other issue was language barriers. So these are entrepreneurs who are trying to navigate a crisis through trying to figure out where to get funding and help without really understanding how to do it. So really, they're finally, after we were holding their hands for a while, we're seeing that they're really listening. They learned their lesson in a way. So they're really listening to all the ecosystem organizations providing support to them. Now we're starting to see, okay, so we're listening, we're gonna keep the business afloat. I think the result of that is really others following suit and really starting their businesses.
Thank you, Jose.
So
well,
Miles,
yeah,
you know, it's amazing to, you know, be with this group of panelists today, and they've really nailed it. And I have to back up what Secretary Marshall said. You know, initially, I think we all thought that people were going to start businesses out of desperation. They had to do something to generate income. But the data that Secretary Marshall and Deputy Secretary Bill Toole have presented today really backs up what our Small Business Center directors found working on the ground. And that was that people really already had a dream of starting a business. And the pandemic was just a catalyst to help them cement that desire to be their own boss and to move forward with that plan to start that business. And we also know that the pandemic really gave people, you know, just time to reevaluate what they were doing. They looked at their lives, they thought about lifestyle choices that they wanted to make, the opportunity really to create their own destiny, spend more time with their families, and essentially just have more balance in their lives. And they felt that starting a business would be a way for them to help achieve some of those personal goals. And so our small business centers have worked with them in really being realistic about all of that and then getting a business up and going.
Well, thank you all for sharing some of those stories that back up some of that data we heard from the Secretary's office. I'm going to stay with you, Ann, regarding some of what y'all are seeing in your small business centers across the state. With these new entrepreneurs that y'all are serving, are you seeing folks explore entrepreneurship as their primary source of income? Are you seeing it as more secondary source of income, more side hustle? What are y'all seeing on the ground in the small business center network?
Well, I think that we really are seeing that a lot of people are doing it as a side hustle. I don't have the specific data that really looks at how many are side hustles and how many have gone for it full time. But my sense of things is that a lot of people have gone for it as their full time opportunity, that they are focusing 100% on the business itself. We do know that a lot of people are doing the side hustle, but the great majority of them have moved forward with concentrating on the business full time.
Thank you for adding that. Is there anyone else who'd like to add to that question there, what you're seeing?
Miles, I'll just share that typically the businesses that we serve in the hub office, which has been in existence in state government since 1999, our businesses are majority sole proprietors. And so from that perspective, some of them use it as per se their side hustle, but many of them have just jumped in, ready to go, eager to try something new and something different. And so we have really been focused here on providing the technical assistance needed to navigate state government. But I really do believe a lot of and we don't have specific data either, so I preference that. But what we do know is that the businesses are mainly sole proprietorships, but they also are wanting to start something new outside of having a second job. So jumping in and just giving it a try.
Great, thanks,
Same
Jamie.
thing here. The majority of the Latino entrepreneurs that we serve are sole proprietorships. The great majority, I would say about 70% of that are sole proprietorships. But really, in the actually lead, that's the only means of making money, making a living. So, but now we're starting to see that trend again, like I mentioned, as we could see from the presentation from Secretary Marshall. A lot of them are really looking into it and starting something because they're curious. A lot of the majority of Latino immigrants are highly entrepreneurial because of necessity. So they're still curious. It comes in their blood. So they're curious about it and really looking into entrepreneurship as a second way of making some money.
Yeah. Thank you both, Jose and Tammie. I'll actually go to the Secretary as a perfect segue into the next question. Getting a lot of great audience questions about who these entrepreneurs are. Secretary Marshall, is there any indication from y'all's survey data whether these new firms are becoming employers in these first 2 years? Do y'all have any data behind that?
I'm going to flip that one to Bill. He's my data guy. Bill, will you take that one, please?
Yes, ma'am. We do see, again, this is self-reported. We do see a number saying that they are employers. And it's not huge, but it's around 40% are saying that they're hiring someone other than themselves. And then what is, quite shocking to us is around, I think about 5 or 7% said they had more than 5 employees in the first year. Now that shocked us. And not what we would have expected. I do want to I didn't make it clear, but our data is for business entities. So we don't see what is happening on the sole proprietorship arena. And so that's something for which we have no insight. We know it's a robust economic driver, but we have no insight into that. And if I can just take a moment, I'd like to share this one screen. This is the screen that failed to show. These are the folks that 55% saw a new opportunity. Only 15% reported to us that they wanted a second income, far lower than we would have expected. And again, this is self-reported, so maybe it's not maybe it's not accurate, but it's the best information we have. So I just wanted to share that with y'all.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Bill. So going back to some of our audience questions, and I think you guys did have a slide on this. We did receive a lot of questions, wondering the parallel between the so-called Great Resignation and also this huge record rise in new firm creation. So to our resource panel and Jose and Tammie, what connection are you seeing there? Are you seeing a lot of working age folks that are coming in having left a job in some sense and are now exploring entrepreneurship as a career path? What are y'all seeing on the ground there?
Well, that's definitely true. There's no doubt that people have left jobs and they're starting businesses. But again, it's that necessity thing that we were talking about early. Do they have to do this? Or is it just something that's been a dream all along for them? And that really has been the key. But yeah, we're definitely seeing people who've left their employment from other businesses, lost their jobs, that are coming in and looking at finally moving forward on that dream business?
Yeah, we in our case, we have seen a little bit of the uptake, as I was mentioning before, but the majority of them have been established businesses trying to keep them afloat. So, and those that we're seeing, it's not like they're leaving their jobs. They're just starting to get into entrepreneurship. They're giving it a try to see how it goes. So most of them are, actually the majority of them are solopreneurs as a part-time. So still keep their full-time job, but they're really looking into it. So I guess you know, that's a little bit of as a result of this pandemic that we're getting out of.
Great, thank you all there. So going back to some of Secretary Marshall's data there, for decades leading up to COVID, the Rural Center had observed a trend of declining new form creation in our rural communities. So obviously we were surprised as anybody when we saw this trend reverse the past 2 years. Secretary Marshall, you alluded to a new support your office is doing to support these rural entrepreneurs, expanding that out to 15 counties. Could you elaborate that on a little more, and then we'll also turn it over to the other panelists to talk about what resources y'all are offering to rural entrepreneurs? Well,
I can let Bill chime in on the data part here. We don't have any real data on, you know, why there's an uptick. I have a sense it's because rural areas have felt forgotten by other parts of the states and decision makers in the state, and that they've just decided to do something on their own. And the heck with the state, you know, kind of thing. So we don't have any real data on it. What we're doing in this RISE program is that we are sending out to anyone who newly creates an entity with us a resource document, a bulletin. That includes things like resources in their community for funding. We have listed everything from the largest bank in the state or in the world on there down to some smaller ones. We've not done any cutoff or any screening as to, you know, who's in the letter and who's not in the letter. So we everything from Kiva, Rural Center, Thread Capital on up to, you know, Wells Fargo or Bank of America, they're all in there. We have given information about the closest community college to them. We have stressed that these things are free to them. We then have taken the data and created information to answer those questions, like what is a checklist, the timing of doing things. Now, for 15 years now, we've been sending out information on Employment Security, Department of Revenue, when somebody files. That's been a tradition just about the whole time I've been in office when we got our technology up and running. But this newsletter includes that, and we're using the self-descriptions of each entity. We did not write out a new cloth what we think the Small Business Center does or the SBTDC does. We have taken their information and plugged it in there. And then when we get like places up in the mountains where there's Mountain Biz Works, you know, in there, we have put in where they can social network, things like local clubs, Lions clubs, Rotary clubs, Chamber of Commerce, those kinds of things. So we've tried to fill in these gaps of what we know is available in that county to answer these people's questions and provide them resources.
Yeah, thank you, Secretary Marshall. I think some of our other folks on the call may actually make the cut for that resource list that you guys are sharing out. So Jose and Tammie, what resources is your organization able to offer to support these rural entrepreneurs?
That's a great question. And when we look at our certified, historically underutilized businesses, which we have almost 6,000 of them here in the state that's certified through our office, and then certainly our disadvantaged business enterprises, which are certified through our NCDOT office for highway work. What we know is in our rural communities, in our rural counties, we do struggle in terms of identifying businesses in those areas, but we know that they're there. From Manio to Murphy, we know that they are there. So we are really focused on further outreach in our furthest of our rural communities, also working in partnership with the Governor's Hometown Strong program, which is specifically geared towards connecting the dots in our rural communities to address the needs. And recently, you probably heard more talk about the governor's $1 billion investment into investment from ARPA funds to infrastructure access and addressing the digital literacy issues that we have, challenges that we have to close our digital gap. I mean, the digital divide is real and we understand it. And so this administration is really focused on how do we reach the broadest of communities to ensure that we can provide level playing field, access to opportunities, and access to jobs and things that we know create and grow communities. Today, you saw the launch of Department of Revenue's second phase 2 of the business recovery grants, which are there to, again, provide a resource to business owners. So I think when you look at a number of resources that we have, not to mention our office, the Hub office, was recently awarded a grant from the U.S. Department of Commerce to house the Minority Business Development Agency's Business Center here in North Carolina. And that center is focused on exactly what Secretary Marshall identified early on in the presentation: technical assistance that is needed, legal, marketing, all of those different technical things that business owners need help with. So the center is in the Research Triangle Park, and we are here to assist businesses that all throughout our 100 counties that we serve.
One of the beautiful things that a lot of people don't talk about, we talk about, really these different businesses needing access to capital, et cetera, but most people forget this sense of community, of collaboration that was created that existed before, but increased during COVID. So a lot of these organizations that you see here and others really bonded and started deploying programming to ultimately help the entire state. So we work very closely, not only with partners at throughout the state, but also to target rural areas. And so we partner with the state to provide in-language information about the recovery grant program that Tammie was mentioning. At the SBA, we provided statewide programming to spread the word in Spanish about EIDL, PPP. We work with the different counties and municipalities to spread the word in language, so about their different programs. So it's really important to really bond and create opportunities and partnerships to bring programming in very specific areas. Right now, we're working with the Rural Center and Threat Capital to start a program in rural areas to come to specific counties with high concentrations of Latinos, to bring not only resources about how to start a business, but also different CDFIs, different grants programs. So it's really, that is going to start happening in the summer in person. We're actually bringing several consultants and specialists to these areas to really bring these resources to these different rural communities.
Thank you, Jose. And I'd like to rephrase that for you, that same question, knowing that you guys have a footprint in community colleges across the state, rural, urban, suburban, with a huge rural footprint that the Small Business Center Network does have. What unique challenges do you hear from your rural entrepreneurs when they come to you looking to start a business? What are they experiencing in their rural communities there?
Thank you. Often we think that they're so different in terms of what the rural businesses face versus the urban businesses. Many of the challenges that they face are really the same. But when you think about the rural businesses, they have the challenge of understanding, who are their customers going to be? They may have a smaller customer base because they're more rural. They're facing the challenges that we've talked about with broadband, having the ability to get their business online and to really have that consistent broadband experience. Like they, if they're really rural, they may not even be able to get on, but maybe if they have a service business, they can go and get some Wi-Fi from somebody's parking lot or something like that. But again, the broadband challenge, I think the other big thing is the same thing that we're all experiencing in our businesses these days. It's the talent challenge. How do they get the employees that they need? How do they find them? How do they retain them? And so they're struggling in some cases to get the help that they need to operate their businesses. And of course, the marketing piece and the mentoring piece. They need solid mentors and support as they enter and continue to operate their businesses. And so sometimes getting that mentorship piece is a challenge in a rural community. But of course, I'm very biased, and I believe that if they check in with their small business center, they're going to get that really solid help and mentorship and the free business counseling and training that they need to get started and stay on track.
Certainly a good starting point, Ann. Thank you for sharing that. So we also heard in the Secretary's data about the rural entrepreneur struggle around broadband as well. Looking at other challenges in the small business space, is there anything that you guys are hearing around critical supports needed as far as childcare, healthcare, other benefits that you think would help these entrepreneurs as they move forward and continue to be viable throughout their business journey? Feel free to anyone to hop in on that one.
So I'll just say childcare has always been a barrier for women-owned businesses, but we're figuring out how to be more flexible in terms of making it work. And certainly from new businesses that are being created, we heard earlier, the need for flexibility was probably high on the list. And so even as we move from childcare, elderly care is a high-ranking priority these days as well. And so we're just seeing a lot from the businesses that we're serving in terms of their need to really be flexible and address parent care issues and or children related issues, whether that's homeschooling or whatever may be the alternative that's best for the families, but certainly more flexibility, but an emphasis in our child care and our elderly care environments, and being able to provide the resources needed for them to sustain their businesses, even though those those types of things exist.
Thank you, Tammie.
For the majority of the ones that we help, which are solopreneurs, it's definitely healthcare, access to healthcare. But the other one that we're seeing, the smaller group of those businesses that have actual employees, really, and was mentioning this earlier, really finding talent and retaining talent. So it's really a challenge in North Carolina for those business owners to retain, to first of all, find a qualified talent. And so it's really something that we're seeing lately.
Miles, I would add to that piece about the talent that small business owners now have to have the financial resources really to compete with other more established businesses, where now we're seeing that Taco Bell is paying people $18 an hour and more to work for them. And that's a big leap for small business owners to make right now. And particularly with the economy and the challenges that we're facing now as we look at anticipating inflationary environment even more and so forth. So I think just making sure that they have the capital, the working capital to actually be able to compete in those wage ranges now is sort of an additional challenge for them.
Yeah, thank you, Ann. And I will say we're getting a lot of great questions in the Q&A that we may not have time for. So we may compile a Word document, send them out to you guys later, and so we can get those to our audience. Secretary Marshall, I do have a question for you. Looking at the survival rates of these businesses, I know you and Bill are measuring these as we move forward and look at the viability of these entrepreneurs. So what is your team doing to measure that continued success and seeing how successful these new entrepreneurs are as they move forward?
Well, we do intend to continue surveying with them, and we also will be cross-checking with the counties that we've already done We do know that some people have gone to Thread Capital because of the bulletin communication that we've sent them. So we're going to try to track how the productivity of the resource we've been sending out. Now, going back to your prior question, I kind of took a slightly different view of the question. You know, if I just truly think that if people had a business plan, as we all tell them to, that includes how to prepare, how to get their balance sheet, their personal balance sheet prepared, how to prepare for an interview with somebody who is potentially going to fund them, is vital. And broadband was the next on my list. And then the hardest nut for me to think about cracking is the common complaint of small folks, small entrepreneurs, and large too, about too many regulations. We don't do a very good job of distinguishing between what are really state level and what is really local level. I think the state gets a bad rap a lot. I mean, licensure predominantly belongs to the state, and there are certainly water quality and EPA things like that. But then when you get down to the various counties, depending upon, I'm talking about all counties, rural and urban. I understand that they're here in Wake County that if you're doing a certain project, it may take 21 different sign-offs before you can actually turn dirt and get something done. I think folks don't understand the pathway or the regulation aspect for opening a restaurant, opening, you know, some other facility that has certain health regulations that go along with it, and maybe even zoning regulations. And those are county things. They are not any statewide at all. I mean, they need to be communicating with their local folks and small business centers will help them get to those and understand those. So I'm really hoping we can drive more folks to the small business centers because it's a good resource and the price is right.
Thank you all for everything you've added there. I'm going to sneak in one last question to close. So understanding the instrumental role, the critical role these new and existing entrepreneurs are going to play in our state's economy moving forward. As a list, what are your top three critical supports do you think resource providers, policymakers can invest in to ensure that these new businesses have a fair chance at long-term success? Jose, you're first on my screen, so I'll start with you.
Number one, investing in existing infrastructure. I mean, there are many wonderful and talented organizations in the ecosystem. North Carolina is very entrepreneurial. Having lived in another state and having been here for 5 years, North Carolina has a strong network of organizations providing support. So definitely investing in the existing support. A lot of these, like I mentioned, we're working very closely together not to reinvent the wheel and provide the same programming. So we're really working together to be strategic and offer the different programs to serve the specific audiences that we serve within the state of North Carolina.
Tammie, you're next up on my screen if you have one you'd like to add there.
Sure. I would say number one, foremost is providing access to capital. So continue to look at, access in creative ways, particularly working with our CDFIs, our community development financial institutions, and continue to fund efforts through the Rural Center that we know many of our businesses connect with. And we cannot ever do enough training and development. So workshops, training, development, I think all of those things will continue to help aid our businesses as they build capacity and long-term survival.
Secretary Marshall, you're next up on my screen.
Well, I've really got basically one answer, and it matches with what has already been said. We're viewing our job as to push your information out there to people so that they know it's available, so they can go access it, how they can just very easily, no-brainer, find you all out there, because you're right, we do have this wonderful structure. Networking, what we're doing here today is the kind of thing that we need to be doing more of. Because there's going to be a lot of opportunities for all of us to provide services out there. So if we can push more folks, because we're the first door, we're the first ones who know who's got this project on their mind. If we can push them all out to you, that's what we want to do to help them get successful.
And any parting words there?
Absolutely. Just to reinforce what's already been said, that You know, all of these businesses will tell you, and the data backs it up, that access to capital is their number one issue. But you can have all the access to capital in the world, but if you don't have the knowledge and the training and the access to the information and the help to get on that regulatory pathway the proper way, if you don't have that help and knowledge, it doesn't matter how much capital you have. So we believe that the training and the assistance that our small business centers can help is going to be a key piece of driving those businesses forward.
That's great. Well, thank you all for joining us. At 1 minute over time, I'll quickly turn it over to Brandy for a close.
Thank you. Thank you all. And thank you for bearing with us just another moment as we close out. So as we close, I just want to share a reminder to sign up for all things Rural Center, including our growing statewide small business coalition, our rural accounts listserv, where you can gain access to weekly legislative updates, resource newsletters, and much, much more. And definitely last but not least, thank you to everyone, our speakers and guests included, for participating in today's session and for all that you do in our state, our communities, and for the people of North Carolina. I hope you're also able to join us as we continue this conversation webinar series on Wednesday, welcoming the SBA State Director, District Director, and members of the legislature to explore the policy opportunities for small businesses moving forward. Have a great small business week, and we hope to see you all again very soon. Thank you.